Hello and welcome back to Inje Speedium in South Korea for the second leg of two races here for round 4 of the 2023 Super Trofeo Asia Series. On screen you can see the mighty 5.2 litre V10 Super Trofeo Huracan Evo 2s out circulating ready for a start. So some earlier racing today. Unlike past rounds of the championship, it's 2 races on one day this weekend. We're all concluded at the end of this one, and that will conclude race 8 of the 12-race program for the 2023 season. Just about 4 hours ago, we saw victory number 5 out of 7 races go back to the dynamic New Zealand duo of Chris van der Drift and Marco Giltrap. They took their 5th win of the year on an outright level and extended their advantage at the top of the pro class points. In fact, so much so that should they end up with a solid result in this one, they could be champions for 2023. Let's take a look at Inje Speedium. First opened in May 2013, 20 turns, 21 thereabouts. You'll work it out a little bit later. Some of the corners go on and are broken down into 3. The first complex into the second complex, up the hill, then into the third complex. Very much like Shanghai in some fashions. You talk to Dan Wells, he thinks that the way he approaches it and breaks through the corners is very similar. You'll see why as we get onto that shortly. Turn 7 to turn 8, a very short straight. 8 is where track limits, and turn 11 have been a big issue for the drivers this weekend. Very complex sequence of 10, 11, 12, 13, another short straight to 14, and then you're through to another hairpin down at turn 17. A long run up from 18 to 19. I talk long run, it may only be 250 to 300 metres. The main straight is only just over 500 metres. Very, very busy lap. And you'll see that when we look at some onboard footage, but certainly the drivers have had their work cut out for them. It's been a big surprise for many, and for most, coming to Inje is their very first visit here. Not so much for the number 63 SQDA Grit Motorsport entry of Brian Lee and John Kwon. They are the local heroes and have a lot of experience around this circuit, not in GT equipment. For Brian Lee, very much in front-wheel drive cars. For John Kwon, he's done a little bit more high-performance circulating of the Inje Speedium venue, and it's 3.90 kilometre, 3.908 in fact, don't miss the...
I am John Kwon, Grit Motorsport, entry number 63 from Korea. Come with me for a lap of Inje Speedium. Third gear going to 4th, high speed. We're actually reaching speed up to about 250 kilometers an hour. And turn 1 is real challenging because it's blind. Also, it's a high speed downhill, and 3 turns, right, very high speed, and going up the hill, and then going into hairpin here. The first part of the turn is very technical, and then after the hairpin, and then we got another technical part coming up. It's called the Omega turn, down, and it's a long left-hand sweepers, and here, and then we're going up again, but it's a very bumpy part of the section. We're entering into the technical side, which is a slow speed turns, high speed entry, then we're slowing down to about 2nd gear, like hairpin, and this is more of a zigzag turn, but again, the surface condition of the track is very bumpy, especially here, and our candy stripes are very tall and high, so we don't want to take that. We're trying to avoid this, and we're now getting into the high speed, the highest speed corners here, and down the hill, hard braking, full brake, and then hairpin again, and then we're going up the hill again. Very technical part. And we're coming up to the last corner, and we're going into a middle to high speed entry, and then exit out fast, and we're on the straight again.
There you have a lap of Inje Speedium on board the SQDA Grit Motorsport entry of John Kwon. They finished up on the podium in the opening race earlier today. Hot, bumpy and busy has very much been the topic of conversation from the drivers across the course of the race weekend so far, and they have certainly had their work cut out for them just getting on top of this very busy 20 corner circuit at only 3.9 kilometres. There's not much chance for a rest, as you could see. We will be very shortly heading down and taking a look at the grid for what is the start of race 8 in the 12 race program for the 2023 season. There is a shot of the rear of the grid. Cars just getting themselves into position. 2 qualifying sessions yesterday, 2 15-minute sessions, one for each driver. And in the single driver entries, they both had to turn a lap. They needed to make sure that they had a time to give themselves a starting position for both races. And some of those drivers have been very busy. But there it is at the end of the day. Top qualifier for the 3rd time this year went to Venezuelan Jonathan Chicotto, sharing with Lee Chung. They took pole position with a 1:37.0, just about 8/10 of a second shy of the time set by Dan Wells in the opening qualifying session. Alongside Marco Giltrap, did a great job alongside him, driving, sharing the car, of course. They won the race this morning. Chris Vanderdrift, the reigning Pro Series champion from 2019, 1:37.4, Vanderdrift behind the wheel. Interestingly, for a man of his experience, he's never been to Inje Speedium before. Way and Miko Nassi. Miko Nassi doing a brilliant job during his qualifying session to set a 1:38.1. Then look how close it is from that point on. David Chen, a 1:38.2. Prom Sombat, a 1:38.2. Oscar Lee, a 1:38.3. Brian Lee in this instance, a 1:38.6. So there's 4 positions covered by about 5/10 of a second. So very, very tight in the mid part of the top 10, rows 3 through to about row 5. Then you've got Mark Darwin set at 1:38.9, so he's within reach too. Vincent Ty with a 1:40.5. David Rio, a 1:40.7 in the second of the BC Racing entries. Henry Kay and Eric Kay. Eric Kay started the first qualifier. He started the first race. He'll take over from his brother Henry with a 1:40.9. Super Chai now leading. I had to have a think about what happened in the first race. He's now leading by 3 points provisionally in the Lamborghini Cup category. He starts from position 12 with a 1:42.8. Hazik O will start the number 5 entry. He shares with his brother, the HZO Fortis Racing Team entry, with a 1:43.6. Kume Prabhakaran, who had dramas in the first race and had to pit just after halfway with a 1:43.9. And then Dr. Ma in the Kamlung Racing entry, who often shares with Keith Vong, is doing solo duties this time around. Keith, unfortunately, has some issues back in Australia. So a shout out to him. He'll be watching on board and was very impressed. Sent me a message after the first race that Dr. Ma had done such a great job driving on his own. Probably the oldest driver in the field. And it's very hot here. Humidity's getting up into the high 70s. Track temperature, if I just take a look at the monitor, is just under 55 degrees Celsius. The sun has been blaring down since about halfway through that opening race, and the ambient temperature has climbed into the mid-30s. So it's going to be very, very uncomfortable in the cars. You can see mid-screen there, the number 33 Iron Lynx entry of Mark Darwin with the silver foil across the windscreen, just to try and protect them a little bit from the heat. There'll be no protecting them from the heat once the racing starts, though, and it's going to be very, very hot work, very physical work. That's one thing that the drivers had noticed, and that was part of the reason why there was such a big gap between the top 3 in the opening qualifying session. That and the fact that as one of the leading pros, Dan Wells, had set the pace. He'd been here before, 2014 Formula Masters Asia Series. And he had some prior experience of this circuit and showed from opening practice and all the way through to qualifying. Dramas, though, whilst leading the opening race, for anybody watching, would have noticed that the entry of he and Oscar Lee, the number 21 DW Evans GT entry, didn't make it to the compulsory pit stop window. They had a clutch issue. And talking to Josh Evans down there after the opening race, he said he thinks maybe they did one too many practice starts yesterday just to get themselves up to speed, to get the car out of pit lane and provide Oscar Lee with everything he needed to be quick straight out of the gate after the compulsory pit stop. Sadly, they didn't make it. The team have, I believe, changed the clutch on the car, and they will be back. But very disappointing for them. They'd, up to today's first race, they'd won 5 of the 6 races in the Pro-Am category to be the comfortable Pro-Am category leaders. But unfortunately, that setback has opened the door just a little bit for some of their rivals to close down the advantage. The other driver who didn't make it to the completion of the opening race was Kumar Prabhakaran, who'd actually had contact with Jonathan Cecotto. So it must have been after the compulsory pit stop, because Way certainly started that car, and Cecotto will start this one from pole position. Now, I don't believe the contact resulted in any kind of penalty, but certainly it did sideline Prabhakaran, and unfortunately for him, they had to do some work on the front suspension. Front left, I think, was the contact, and that forced him down into pit lane, and we didn't see him return from that point on. So 2 cars down, but 2 cars back in the field. We are a few cars down due to business challenges for some of the competitors, and they weren't able to make it. Now, you can see that swarm of people in the middle of the screen. That would be the SQDA Grit Motorsport entry. I've seen some photos so far of them from the opening race down on the grid, and you could hardly see the car. So popular were they. A lot of people here from Lamborghini South Korea, or Lamborghini Seoul. Of course, they are supporters of the number 63 SQDA Grit Motorsport entry, but also of the number 17 Racegraph entry of Gavin Huang and David Rio. So they have a big investment in this. They've got a lot of people here. There's a lot of Lamborghinis. I've got to put my teeth in, don't I? A lot of Lamborghinis out in the paddock area. Various styles, from the Urus to the Huracan to Aventadors. There's all sorts of models out there in the back, and some beautiful cars too. But right now the focus turns to the Super Trofeo Huracan Evo 2, 5.2 litre, mid-mounted, V10, naturally aspirated. There's no turbos and induction here. And these cars have certainly been modelled around the road car. The Evo 2, in contrast to the original Evo Huracan, has got more akin to the road car in its styling. But in addition to that, it is very similar to the GT3 car. There are differences, notably the aero. The aero isn't quite as dramatic on the Super Trofeo as it is on the GT3. The ride height is slightly higher than the GT3, and the tyre diameter and width for the Super Trofeo is narrower and slightly smaller diameter than the GT3 car. So that provides some performance differences. But when you look at the pace of GT3 car around this circuit, and we can only go back to, I think it's 2014, and that was set at a 132.888. Now, we saw a 136.1 from Dan Wells during the open qualifying session, and that did set the fastest pace for a Super Trofeo. It isn't our first visit here for Lamborghini Super Trofeo Asia. In the formative years of the championship, which began all the way back in 2011, the Gallardo Super Trofeo did contest around here. So that was a fair while ago. Certainly Christopher Vanderdrift was around in those days, but racing slightly different equipment. I think he would have been in open wheelers at that stage of his career. But he'd never been here before. So that was an interesting one for him. He said there's not too many circuits he can go to in Asia now where he's never been before, but this was certainly one of them. What that showed was that drivers with past experience, the likes of John Quan and his teammate Brian Lee, and of course Dan Wells, they managed to perform better through practice and qualifying. 2 90-minute practice sessions, but in pretty high heat conditions and humidity. There is the SQDA Grit Motorsport entry of Quan and Lee just on left of screen. The absolute crew just keeping tabs on the car. Brian Lee will start the car for this one, and he will bring it through the field, he hopes, and back onto the podium from position 7 on the grid as things stand right now. So in the opening race this morning, 50 minutes race duration, no safety cars, which was good news. We've just explained there were a couple of casualties in the face of Dan Wells and Kumar Prabhakaran, but ultimately it was victory to Chris Vanderdrift and Marco Giltrap for Absolute Racing, Giltrap Group and Lamborghini Auckland. They took the win comfortably in the end by 45.6 seconds over Liang Jiatong and David Chen, sharing the number 16 Harmony Racing entry. That car started from pole position in the second round of the championship, with David Chen behind the wheel at that point. Brian Lee and John Quan will finished in position 3. They were about 53 seconds back from the race lead and finished third and victors in AM. The first two were first and second in the pro category. The first Pro-Am entry was Wei and Miko Nassi. Good charge through the field in the closing laps by Nassi got him up to position number 4. Aniwat Prom Sombat in the star performance by absolute number 19 entry, second in AM and 5th outright. Jason Lowe and Mark Darwin, third in the AM category and 6th outright in the opening race. And it was back to Lee Chung and Jonathan Chicotto, who claimed second in Pro-Am, 7th outright. And first car a lap down, Johnson Huang and Vincent Tai in the BC Racing number 51 entry. Henry Kay and Eric Kay were 5th in the AM category and 9th outright. Gavin Huang, Johnson Huang's younger son, straight out of karts and done a little bit of TCR racing in his home country, he and David Rio. A good result for them. They were in front of Gavin's dad there for a while, but in the end crossed the line in position number 10. They too were a lap down. Super Chai wound up taking another victory. That was his third win in Lamborghini Cup. That puts him to the top of the point standings in that classification. He crossed the line ahead of Hario and Haziq behind the wheel at the end of the 50-minute duration for the HZO Fortis Racing team. And last across the line, Dr. Ma, who had been very impressive through practice. Despite 2 90-minute practice sessions, he was running at the tail end of the top 12 for much of yesterday's running and just fell back a little bit at the end of qualifying. It's hot, hard work for these guys, and they're about to do it again as we embark on the 8th race of the 2023 season. Of course, we kicked off at Sepang in Malaysia in early May. We went then to the very first visit in 11 seasons of Super Trofeo Asia to Australia, to the Ben Motorsport Park in early June. We're at Fuji 5 weeks ago for round 3 of the championship. We're here this weekend. We were scheduled to be at Everland, just outside of Seoul, off to the east. We're in fact 150 kilometres north-northeast of Seoul, about half an hour south of the North Korean border at Inje Speedium. And in 3 weeks' time, we will have the last of the races in the Asian region when we return to Shanghai International Circuit, a circuit that many of these drivers have contested before, with the exception, interestingly, of the SQDA Grit Motorsport entry of John Quan and Brian Lee, have not travelled until the start of this season to compete outside of their home country. And they turned up as a very much an unknown quantity at the opening round in Malaysia and blew everybody away with their choice to go into slicks after heavy rain at the start of the opening race and charge their way through to a podium finish. It was very, very impressive, and they've been like that for most of the championship so far. A couple of setbacks at the Ben Motorsport Park. Neither of them were completely comfortable getting to grips with that circuit, but another circuit they'd not seen before. This one, though, they could do with their eyes closed, but let's hope they don't have to. The final round of the championship, Vallelunga in Italy. That is the world final weekend. 16th and 17th of November, probably Thursday, Friday, will be the final 2 races of Lamborghini Super Trofeo Asia, and then joining North America and Europe for an all-in battle for the world final honours. Dan Wells and Oscar Lee have had a stoush in that particular battle in the past and done quite well. So they've had some good experience in Europe. Dan Wells, of course, the pro element of that Pro-Am entry, and he's doing everything he can to get Oscar Lee up to speed. And Oscar Lee, very impressive during his qualifying session for this race, will start from position 6, was only 9/10 of a second back from the experienced New Zealander and winner of race 1 alongside Marco Giltrap. We are, of course, talking about Chris Vanderdrift. A little bit of activity from the teams, just checking what's going on there. Let's hope there's no dramas. The 1-minute board is up. The remainder of the teams will remove themselves from the grid. Standard form, rolling start for Super Trofeo Asia, as it is for Super Trofeo all over the world. Less of a drag on the drivetrain, less to go wrong when you've got a rolling start. They do need to cross the line in formation very much like they are at the moment. The race director during driver's briefing was very quick to point out he wants them in two lines across, or certainly approaching the start-finish line to start the race. And they need to be across their current pit box, or sorry, their grid box as they sit in it at the moment. And I'm sure Jonathan Cecotto is going to be absolutely pitch perfect. He was in this position after dominating qualifying at the Ben Motorsport Park in Australia back in June, but started just a little bit too quickly. There's a radar gun keeping tabs on what's going on as we head off on the formation lap, and he was clocked well over what the regulations needed him to be between the two signalling lines before the start. And despite being the dominant force in Australia, he was given a fairly hefty penalty post-race because of the starting procedure. The unfortunate thing for the very fast young Venezuelan driver was that we finished under safety car. So I think it was a 30-second penalty in the end. That dropped him right back down the order. Otherwise, it would have been a perfect weekend. Second race, he was pitch perfect. Started from pole again, didn't put a foot wrong, drove off into the distance, and even hit pit lane with the compulsory pit stops and exited in the lead. Didn't lose the lead once during that race. He was the standout performer, and by his own admission, he had a point to prove in that second race. He was racing alone that weekend. Li Chung wasn't able to make it to Australia. He was considered a pro driver, and he did the job that he needed to do. Between the 20-minute and 30-minute mark of this race, we will see a compulsory pit stop. Every team must pit in that pit window. If they do not, it's a drive-through penalty and effectively race over, certainly on a circuit like this. And we will see every team with a two-driver entry stop for 87 seconds. We will see the single-driver entries, which is 3 of the 4 Lamborghini Cup entries, stop for 90 seconds. Probably works against the single drivers in Lamborghini Cup, but it's not necessarily what the rule is set for. We'll explain that to you a little bit later on. Control Hankook rubber, medium compound tyre, doing very well. Tyre degradation is something a lot of drivers have been talking about because the temperatures are high, and we did see 57 degrees during yesterday afternoon's track temperature. We're currently at 54.5, so keep a close eye on that as we come through turn 14, 15. I think we are at the moment. No, sorry, 17, 18. And cars are starting to form up. We should, the way things are going at the moment, expect to see the track temperature climb beyond that. So let's see how tyres go. Tyre allocation is enough for drivers to be able to complete all the racing pretty much with fresh rubber in most occasions. Qualifying and race, you can make your choice, but we will see them top of screen very soon. There is the Euro safety car pulling off, and Jonathan Cecotto left of screen, controlling this start. Chris Vanderdrift alongside. Two very, very experienced campaigners. What will we see as the lights go out? Cecotto controlling the pace, very much slower than he was in Australia. And we're away. Cars diving to the inside. They can come out of formation now as we go down to this effectively triple right-hander. 3 wide further back. That's the tie entry, trying to make it a little bit wide. I noticed with some replay footage from the first race, a couple of cars got up wide. In fact, they were one of them on the curb on the inside during the opening race. Cecotto dives across the inside. Oh, he's gone up the inside. That's a good move from the number 19 entry. Yo from Sombat has just taken over position number 4, dived up the inside. I think that is of David Chen. You don't see that very often. Chen trying to come back as they go through round turns 5A, 5B and turn 6. That's another triple banger as we head now down to turn 7. And Jonathan Cecotto leads the field comfortably. Chris Vanderdrift just in a watching brief behind him. But as he said to me earlier after that first race, the pace that he has compared to Marco Giltrap, very, very close. Whereas for Li Chung, he's a little bit off as very much an AM driver. The pace of Jonathan Cecotto, who is the lead driver in that number 10 car. Lead driver on pace, I should point out. So really, there is no battle here for the combination of Chris Vanderdrift and Marco Giltrap. They could very much start to think about championship. Of course, Chris Vanderdrift is the the 2019 champion, the Pro Class champion of Lamborghini Super Trofeo Asia. And you can see the two class drivers of this field just opening up a nice lead. That looks like it might be Mikko Nassi in position number 3. Of course, he started this race very, very comfortably forward in position number 4. And no, in fact, I'm looking at the race result. Miko Nassi started from position 3. He holds position 3 from the Harmony Racing entry of David Chen. As, we look to pick up some more of the action as the teams are firing down into turn 1. And on the timing board, half a second lead from Jonathan Chicotto back to Chris Vanderdrift. Another 2.8 seconds back to Miko Nassi. 0.4 of a second to David Chen. Behind him, Yoprom Sombat in the number 19 Star Performance by Absolute Racing entry. We're just looking at them on screen. That is the car we're looking at on screen. Marginally clear of the SQDA Grit Motorsport entry of Brian Lee. He will be doing everything he can to try and move that car forward. In fact, I don't think that is the... No, of course, that is Vanderdrift all over the back of the other yellow, red and black entry. I'm watching a timing monitor and the screen at the same time. That is a different coloured yellow. It's more canary yellow than fluoro yellow that is used by the number 19 all-tie Absolute Racing entry. There it is back in position number 5. Position number 6 was Brian Lee. Position 7, Mark Darwin. Oscar Lee back in position number 8 and hoping that that car gets itself back to where it needs to be. Vincent Ty in position 9 for BC Racing. Position 10 for Henry Kay, driving with his brother Eric. In fact, there's been a change there. David Rio in the second of the BC Racing supported entries. The Racecraft number 17 entry for Lamborghini Korea is in position number 10. So there's been a swap there. The Triple Ace Racing entry now back to position number 11. Super Chai in the Siam Gas Course entry leading Lamborghini Cup in position number 12 ahead of Haziko, Kumar Prabhakaran and Dr. Ma bringing up the rear of the field, but within reach of his Lamborghini Cup rivals. So that competition is still carrying on. Nobody's really getting away too much at the moment. Chicotto leading the field, but only half a second clear of Chris Vanderdrift. Vanderdrift knows he doesn't need to do anything too dramatic in this race. He doesn't need to get past the Venezuelan driver. He can comfortably sit there until the compulsory pit stops and allow Marco Giltrap to battle with Lee Chung, because should they win this one, by calculations at the moment, holding a 50-point advantage after 7 races, 15 points up for the win, 12 for second, 10 for third. They get another victory. They've all but sealed their championship, and for Marco Giltrap that will be a great result for the young New Zealander who's working his way through the ranks. Next weekend he's off to the Thailand Super Series and we will see him compete, of course, in a One Make Cup also in Australia. He's done a lot of miles in his home country, New Zealand, and with a driver coach sitting alongside him in Chris Vanderdrift, you can't help but fast track your experience. 5 minutes down in this race, continuing to lead. Jonathan Chicotto at the front of the field by half a second over the very comfortable, waiting, watching Chris Vanderdrift. Third position to Miko Nassi, who is under a little bit of fire from behind by David Chen. These cars are all maintaining the position in which they started. Overtaking is one thing a lot of these teams will tell you is very, very difficult on this circuit. There isn't really a straight of any great length. And if you commit yourself to a passing move, you're going to have to make sure that you are really committed and you make sure that the car you're overtaking has seen you. We've seen a little bit of contact during the course of the weekend so far because of that very reason. We talk about it all the time. A GT car, you're low. You're sitting low, you're sitting back, you're back beside the B pillar effectively. And the mirrors on these cars, well, they look good, and you could probably look at them if you had time and you were travelling at 60 kilometres an hour down a side street. But on a racetrack, when everything's happening and you're trying to find the apex of a corner and you're on the absolute limit of grip and adhesion, you're not really spending a lot of time looking in the rear vision mirror. So that means it's the job of the driver behind you to commit that pass and make sure it sticks. We've seen a couple of them during the opening race, a couple of position changes, but they've been quite rare. In fact, the very position we were just looking at on track, it's down at turn 13. We saw Brian Lee try and effect a passing move on Super Chai during the opening race, the local driver. got on the gas just a little bit hard because he knew he had to get drive out of the corner. That just forced the tail around, put him into what we'd call in Australia a tank slapper. He was forced to straighten the car up, drive over the curb off the outside of the corner. That opened the door for David Chen to take a position away. We did see a couple of spins too during the course of the practice sessions, and one during the opening race. I'm trying to remember who that was, but similar sort of scenario, just getting onto the gas early because the drive off the corner is what's going to give you any kind of edge. Main straight's about 600 metres in length, so it's not really long enough to wind yourself up. Very, very different to Fuji International Speedway with a near 2 kilometre main straight. So a lot of work for these guys to do. 20 or 21 corners, depending on how you count them, because there's a 5A and a 5B and a 6 and a 4. Very, very busy circuit for these drivers. So between that and the heat that they're facing on track, still 54.5 degrees Celsius track temperature as this battle for position number 3 goes on. There's David Chen on Miko Nassi. In fact, I think that's further back. That looks like one of the BC Racing entries. That is, and it's Henry Kay. So that is Vincent Tai and Henry Kay battling for position number 10. There had been a position change there. I thought, in fact, that the Triple Ace Racing entry had been in front of Johnson and Vincent. They had been, but they were overtaken. So it looks like Henry Kay is trying to mount a recovery, get a position back on Vincent Tai as they work their way forward. At the front of the field, the lead now out to 1.4 seconds. So one wonders whether Vanderdrift's just decided to let Cecotto go. Lap time last time round, 138.7, 139.04 for Chris Vanderdrift, about a quarter of a second, 3/10. The New Zealander dropped that last lap around. So I think he's just comfortable. When you consider pole position for this leg and this group, was Cecotto with a 37.1. Temperatures were very similar to the way they are now, but tyre bank would have been different. And when I did question Jonathan Cecotto about why he felt he was almost a second slower rather than the time of Dan Wells during his opening qualifying session, he explained that they didn't in fact put new rubber on for their qualifier. They kept it for the race, whereas the Wells Oscar Lee team elected to go for fresh rubber, from what I understand. I haven't checked that with Dan Wells, but I'm sure Jonathan Cecotto wasn't telling me a porky pie. And it was, in fact, the case. So there will be a little bit to work on with the teams with tyres. No compulsory pit stop tyre changes or refueling. Certainly don't need to with the tanks in these cars. They'll comfortably do a 50-minute race and probably do more than an hour, to be honest. But no need to change tyres. If you do change tyres, that is an immediate 50-second additional time penalty to your compulsory stop. So that effectively puts you completely out of contention. So you need to make those choices before the race starts as to which way you are going to go. So a good battle pack here. That's the 19 entry of Yo, Passaret Promsombat. He is battling with Brian Lee, and I would suggest Mark Darwin in the orange entry with a big Garfield down the side. Leisure Motorsport, plenty of leisure for Garfield. He was all about lasagna and leisure. As the lead up front stabilised again. So what's interesting is Miko Nassi, 4.4 seconds back from Chris Vanderdrift and maintaining station. 39.3 last time to Vanderdrift, 39.4 for Nassi, 39 dead for Jonathan Cecotto, who's continuing to pull out about 3/10 or so on the New Zealander per lap. But when you look at the pace of Marco Giltrap versus Cecotto's teammate Lee Chung, that is certainly more than 3/10 of a second. So they will more than make that up after the compulsory stop. But Vanderdrift is certainly a very canny driver. He'll know that he wants to hand the car to Giltrap with good rubber, just in case there's any chance that Marco has to work himself back into contention for the outright victory. But that just highlights the 4 different classifications that we see with Lamborghini Super Trofeo. Of course, we have the Pro category for drivers like Marco Giltrap and Chris Vanderdrift. We have the Pro-Am category So the pro drivers with an amateur driver. We have the AM category for full amateur drivers who may have some experience, but not full-time drivers, not professional drivers, which is what the pro is all about. And then the Lamborghini Cup for drivers who have come into the sport later in their lives or later in their careers, not classified at any level. You can't be a young driver and be a Lamborghini Cup entry, but you can certainly, or that could be a position change. That was Vincent Tai just going a little bit wide. Henry K rather, just looking up the inside. But again, on another track with a long straight or a much wider exit, he may have stuck the nose up the inside, but there's no sense putting yourself in position for contact. So he opted to keep out of that. Lamborghini Cup drivers, the likes of Kumar Prabhakaran, he's in his later stages of life where he can enjoy himself, have a little bit more time to relax and follow up on what makes him happy. And what he decided to make him happy is competing in Lamborghini Super Trofeo, certainly in Asia. He's also competing in Lamborghini Super Trofeo Europe, doing double duty with the Iron Lynx team. Explained to me yesterday that with 50 cars in the field in Europe, it's a lot harder to get a clean lap and stay out of trouble than it is here in Asia. We're down to 15 this weekend, usually certainly for the first 3 rounds of the season. We'd had between 20 and 21 entries, but business commitments and a couple of issues. Certainly Ray Wu, who's part of the number 10 entry, the TRT racing operation that is looking after race leader Jonathan Chicotto and Lee Chung. He had an incident where he's involved in contact at reasonably high speed at Fuji Speedway during race 2. And that has damaged the chassis of the car, rather. And the car is being repaired, I think, back in Italy and will return, they hope, for Shanghai, or they will certainly have an alternate solution in play. We also saw that the father and son team of Tony and Jackson Walls, they're right in the mix with the Pro-Am category, the greatest rivals to Oscar Lee and Dan Wells, but unfortunately for them, a prior commitment for Jackson Walls, who's competing in another championship in his native Australia. He couldn't avoid the clash, and for Tony, who was due to come and race, he unfortunately had a last-minute business call, as did Bobby Buncheron, and that kept them away from this event. So down a little bit on numbers, but the teams are all having a very, very good time. We're not on a support act for anybody else here this weekend. We were with Super Formula last time out at Fuji Speedway. Now, this is a sole weekend for Lamborghini Super Trofeo Asia, and a great opportunity for Lamborghini South Korea and Lamborghini Seoul to bring invited guests. Lots of hot laps. I think my old mate Andrew Kim, who's done a lot of GT competition in the Asian region and a bit of TCR racing. In fact, he holds the TCR lap record here at Inje Speedium, has been conducting a few hot laps. I'd be surprised if driver coach Andre Couto, the former Macau Grand Prix winner, wasn't taking invited guests for an exciting run. And when you hear that Urus SUV launch off the line and monster down to turn 1, it's one of the most glorious sounds as a race fan you will ever hear. The sound reverberating through the mountains, beautiful area of Korea, and certainly one of the most picturesque circuits in the Asian region. Very well, nicely placed hotel here too, which allows you to throw the shades open in the morning and look down on the circuit. A little bit of misty cloud across the mountains this morning, a bit of moisture in the air, but the weather's certainly been dry for the 3 days we have been here so far, and this is the end of it, sadly. Teams and support staff, top speed support staff that put on these fantastic events will be packing up and loading up cars and heading off to Shanghai International Circuit for the 5th round of the season in 3 weeks' time. This battle between Vincent Tai and the BC Racing entry and the Triple Ace Racing entry of Henry Kay over position number 10 continues to go on track. Is up front. Well, that's interesting. Chris Vanderdrift has closed down the race leader. Be interesting to see what's going on at the front of the field, because that gap was out to about 1.7, 1.8 seconds. It's now just over a second. Last time round, 139.3 for Jonathan Chicotto, but in contrast to that, a 139.1 for Chris Vanderdrift. Nico Nassi's dropped off the pace now, but still in just over a 140.0, 140.9 for David Chen, who's a little bit further back, I'm sure, than he would like. From Sombat's 140.7, 140.7 for Brian Lee, who unfortunately for him doesn't seem to be able to make any inroads on his AM class rival. Of course, he and John Kwan are leading the AM category at the moment. Third outright and victory in AM in the opening race this morning has put them on 84 points. Anuat and Prom Sombat on 77 points. So they'll be pretty keen to make sure they don't lose too much ground to their Thai rivals, because that championship is well and truly wide open. Jason Lowe and Mark Darwin, they're starting to move themselves a little bit further forward as Vincent Tai again leaves the door open. And quite wisely, Henry Kay decides, nope, I'm not going to have a single look at that. But it would be nice to have a good look at the drivers at the front of the field, because that's where the action will be. Well, Chicotto, on hearing that, maybe he's listening to me, he's just opened that lead up. He's taken 2/10 out of the New Zealander on that last lap. Lead out to 1.2 seconds. In Lamborghini Cup, Super Chai leads by 3 points now over Prabhakaran, and Dr. Ma is within 12 points of the lead in the LC Cup classification. And in LC Cup, as things stands at the moment, well, Super Chai has dropped back to position number 2, and he's 6 seconds back. Zeke O is really, well, I won't say he's on fire. We don't want to see anybody on fire, but he's turning in some very, very impressive laps. The HZO Fortis Racing Team entry is on target, what I think would be their maiden win of this year. I'll just go back to the Lamborghini Cup classification. They've been on the podium 5 times, 2 DNFs, and their best result so far was second during the opening race this morning. So this would be their maiden victory if they can manage to keep it going. They've had a bit of a tough season so far. Dramas in Malaysia, dramas in Fuji during the opening race, were unable to complete the opening race, so 2 DNFs. By contrast, Super Chai had a single DNF at the Bend, but his consistency with 3 race wins and overall 5-6 podiums out of 7 starts has really put him in the box seat. A couple of pole positions, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them during the course of the 7 rounds hasn't been, or 8 rounds so far, hasn't been too bad. Is this a passing move? What are we seeing here? Oh, he's pushed him very, very wide. And Yo's just been forced wide, and he's got up the inside. So there's a passing move. You can see just how treacherous it was. And it looks like the door was open too for... Oh, I'm just trying to work out who I'm looking at. Now, this is the race lead. So I'm looking at a yellow and black car. I'm sorry, I was caught up with the Prom Sombat car, but this is in fact Jonathan Chicotto and Chris Vanderdrift. So Vanderdrift's closed to within a car length. So whether he's decided to push the pace or whether Chicotto's just lost pace. So they were the cars I think that we were watching going around a back marker, because they both lost about 2 seconds on that last lap. So that could have been very, very sketchy. You saw 2 wheels for Chicotto out in the grass. Now, I've got a funny feeling the pit window is open. Yes, it is. So we've just gone under, or just over rather, 20 minutes in this race, just under 30 minutes left to go. You can see the time clock, and I can hear a car coming down pit lane in front of me. And that, not surprisingly, was Oscar Lee. So he will be in to hand over to Dan Wells, and they will do what they can. Oscar Lee holding on to position 8 as he crossed the line. Dan Wells will jump behind the wheel after the TW Evans GT team have done their service. And that looks very much like David Chen now into pit lane to hand over to Liang Jiatong. And it looked like Brian Lee also in pit lane. So there's a string of cars coming down pit lane. If I take a look at the monitor, I can see a bunch of blue P's. David Chen, Brian Lee, Oscar Lee, and Henry Kay are currently in pit lane. Now, I must apologise for the timing issues we had earlier. Anyone listening to the coverage will wonder what I was rabbiting on about. I couldn't trust the timing monitor, as it turned out. There was a timing glitch to the point where there seemed to be multiple pickup points in cars, or multiple timing lines that were picking up the driver laps. So they weren't just recording single timing points. They were recording dual timing points, which really messed up the timing board. So what we were seeing on screen here was actually a lot more accurate than what we were seeing with the live timing board. Now, that looked like it might have been the leaders. It certainly was. Chicotto with champion-elect, can we call him? I hope I don't put the commentator's curse on him and that I'm not on the same flight back down south, because I won't hear the end of it. And I certainly don't wish that on Marco Giltrap in his first season with Lamborghini Super Trofeo Asia. That looks like it was Dan Wells just returning to the circuit. And we have a 10-minute window for all these teams to hit pit lane and sort out the race order. It'll get a little bit mixed up. So what you're seeing on screen may not necessarily be the track positions the way the compulsory pit stop window will finish. So we need to let a couple of laps to just get everything to sort itself out. And we will have a good indication based on driver pace and track position as to who will be fighting for the outright victory as we get towards the end of this one. But I would be very surprised if we didn't see the number 84 Absolute Racing entry for Giltrap Group and Lamborghini Auckland of Marco Giltrap and Chris Vanderdrift in a very, very strong position to put themselves back on the top step of the podium and with it, unofficially, claim the Pro Class Championship for 2023. We have to look at the numbers, of course, and results are provisional until proved otherwise and signed off by the race director and the stewards. But based on math, the advantage certainly that the two Kiwis have is very, very impressive in the outright pro category. Now back to category leaders. In Pro-Am, it is Chicotto and Lee Chung. In the pro category, it's the people that we were just talking about, the very team that may well take the pro title. That, of course, is Chris Vanderdrift and Marco Giltrap. In the AM category, it's Mark Darwin and Jason Lowe. And in the Lamborghini Cup classification, it is the brothers O, Haziq and Harry in the HZO Fortis Racing Team entry, who are currently shown in position number 8. But, of course, the order is a little mixed up now as we work through the compulsory pit stops. But at the moment, with almost 50% of race 8 of the season completed, it is looking very, very good for Absolute Racing, and perhaps no surprise given their experience in this part of the world. Ingo Mater, who's down there in pit lane, and Fabien Fior, the duo that make up Absolute Racing. I think they're going to need a bigger trophy cabinet the way these guys are operating. But, of course, it's not just them. They have a very experienced team of engineers, many of whom they've trained in this part of the world, many of whom are still with them, many of whom fly in for these events specifically to look after the many and varied teams of Absolute Racing, whether GT cars or open wheelers. They've seen an awful lot of success. They've been very, very successful over many, many years. I can hear what I think is the race leader coming into pit lane. Oh, that was very sketchy coming through the final corner. A full four-wheel drift, nicely collected, but that could have ended very, very badly. But Chris Vanderdrift, he's in pit lane. He's comfortable enough. He doesn't need to get towards the end of this window. He's done his 50% of the race. It's over to Marco Giltrap, who he's been very impressed with, and so he should have been. Giltrap has been shown a very, very mature head during the course of this year, been a very, very mature driver. Has taken on board all the advice given to him from Absolute Racing. He's taken on board all the advice given to him by Chris Vanderdrift. And why wouldn't you? Vanderdrift has seen a great deal of success in many forms of motorsport in Asia, and not just in Asia, all over the world. One of the class performers from his home country. There's certainly plenty of them. I had to have a giggle when I saw some apparel being given to Marco Giltrap earlier in the weekend. It was addressed to Marco Giltrap. I guess you've got Chris Vanderdrift and you've got Shane Van Giersbergen. Maybe it's just part of the thing. He needs to be a double banger or a triple banger to be successful as a racing driver from New Zealand. I wouldn't have thought so. He seems to be doing a pretty good job. And the Giltrap family, of course, have been long-time supporters of young talent in New Zealand and motorsport across the board. So great to see part of the family coming through the ranks And Marco certainly will be one of the stars to watch in future. Of course, part of the junior program for Lamborghini Super Trofeo, alongside Jackson Walls, who has been very, very impressive so far this year. And the other entry, of course, in that illustrious group is Shengwei Zhu, who, of course, isn't racing here this weekend either. As the action continues further back down the order, that looks like it is the SQDA Grit Motorsport entry, still battling with the Harmony Racing entry. Liang Zhaotong likely behind the wheel. John Quan in the wheel, at the wheel rather, of the number 63 SQDA Grit Motorsport entry. Pit window still has 2.5 minutes to go. In pit lane at the moment is the HZO Fortis Racing Team entry. Harry O about to take over from his brother Haziq. So they will certainly be keen to try and retain their lead and what would be their maiden victory in Lamborghini Cup. That looked like the perhaps the Miko Nassi entry. It was a blue and black car. It may well have been the number 17 entry. Just double check the timing monitor. No, it's David Rio. So it was the number 17 entry, I think, coming into pit lane. And that is from position number 4 in this race. Mark Darwin in position 3, position 2, Miko Nassi, and Jonathan Chicotto continuing to lead. And I would suggest the ideal time for him to pit lane would be right about now. I'd be very surprised if you didn't see him coming into pit lane very, very soon. Keep an eye on the number 10 entry. And there he is, right on cue, just disappearing below us for TRT Racing to hand over to Li Chung. There is Super Chai, that bright orange machine. I think that's Miko Nassi also coming down pit lane. And that should likely leave Mark Darwin as the last entrant to come down pit lane. And right on cue, Garfield's smiling pace disappears below me. So Jason Lowe will be due to jump behind the wheel of the number 33 Iron Lynx entry. Now for the number 37 Iron Lynx entry, Kumar Prabhakaran is in position number 14 on track, third outright in Lamborghini Cup. Dr. Ma is fourth, and I can't blame him. I'm actually quietly surprised that he has managed to make it as far as he has in these conditions. Track temperatures dropped off 0.5 degree. I don't know whether that translates to cabin temperatures inside the car, but certainly not an awful lot of airflow in a modern GT car. Some of them are lucky enough to have air conditioning. I have to recall whether or not these guys do. I'm not sure that they do, but the drivers do spend a lot of time in ice baths. It was Vincent Tai coming down pit lane, the number 51 BC Racing entry. And with the pit stop window, 10 seconds left, that would be certainly closed. So pit lane's closed for the compulsory pit stop window, excuse me. So all the teams should be well and truly organised. Let's see what this does for the end result. Will Li Chung manage to rejoin ahead of Marco Giltrap, or will in fact Miko Nassi get way out in front at the front of this field? They all have to stop for a similar time, remember. It just depends on how quickly they manage to get themselves out. The number we're looking for is 87 seconds. And, well, it looks like Nassi and Wei have done it in 87.8 seconds, 87.5 for Giltrap and Vanderdrift. They were right on the money. No surprise there. 88.3 for, oh, in fact, it's 88.3 for Nassi and Wei. And for Jason Lowe and Mark Darwin, it was 87.8. So team's doing a pretty good job. 88.2 also for, oh no, it was Giltrap, sorry. It's changed just slightly, looking at it from a slight angle. Dan Wells and Oscar Lee, they did it in an 87.5. So they were well and truly on the money with that one. As we look at the number 10 entry that appears on the timing monitor at least to be leading this field. Where has Dan Wells wound up in all of this? He's been out there early, thundering around, making up time on track. Currently, they're shown in position number 6 and right behind the Giltrap and Vanderdrift entry. So that could play out very, very nicely for Dan Wells. What do we got on screen? There's some action. It's a bit hard to determine exactly who that is, but that could well have been Oscar Lee. Sorry, that is Marco Giltrap by the look of it. And Way, potentially. Let's look at the timing monitor again just to see where we are, track positions. So with 17 or just under 18 minutes to go in this race, we have got the order sorted out. Giltrap leads by 10 seconds over Lee Chung. Dan Wells is in fact in position number 3 and just 0.8 of a second. That's what we were watching on screen with those two cars, I would hazard a guess to say. So watch out for Dan Wells. I'm not sure he's going to be able to catch Marco Giltrap, but I'm certain that he's going to be able to move into position number 2. Wei Lang Yi having taken over for Miko Nassi in the Safe House entry. They are not too far behind the battle for position number 2. So that's going to be very interesting on track. Jason Lowe's taken over the Iron Lynx entry from Mark Darwin. They're a good 15 seconds further back. Then it is the number 19 Star Performance by Absolute entry, leading John Quan, who's taken over the SQDA Grit Motorsport entry from Brian Lee. Liang Jiatong in the Harmony Racing entry is position 8. Position 9 for Gavin Huang, the Racecraft entry. Eric Kay now behind the wheel of the Triple Ace Racing entry he shares with his brother. Then it is Johnson Huang in the BC Racing entry. Harry O in the HZO Fortis Racing Team entry, continuing to lead Lamborghini Cup over Super Chai, Kumar and Dr. Ma. It's getting a little bit busy out there on track, but the battle that is of interest is at the front of the field, and that is over position 2. But I'm pretty certain by about now that Dan Wells have taken it. He is a good battle on track. Now, that's Super Chai. He's embroiled in that one, so I would suggest that is a number of your cars for Lamborghini Cup. No, in fact, that is, well, that'd be Aniwat Lamahadtai, who's taken over from Sombat in the number 19 entry, battling with Jason Lowe. So Lowe in the orange entry, the fluoro yellow, black and red entry has Yo behind the wheel. Sorry, Mai's behind the wheel now. Yo started the car. And that is a battle for position. That's the fight over position number 5. So ahead of them is Super Chai, ahead of Super Chai. So he's about to go a lap down. That may well be Harry O. In fact, it is. So that is the 2 leaders of Lamborghini Cup battling with the drivers fighting for the AM category lead. So this is one of the beauties of Lamborghini Super Trofeo, is you have battles right up and down the order. You could say everyone gets a trophy. Well, that's part of the battle of it, but everyone's in with a good chance of getting a trophy. And I don't think there's too many people this year who haven't been able to take a trophy home as a result of their performances on track. And that is part of the success and the beauty of this category. So we're seeing more and more of that action this weekend. There's what looks like the sole entry of, well, no, that would be Wei, who's taken over from Nassi. That is the Thai entry. It is the Thai entry. Now, they were caught up in a big battle of cars. He was battling with the number 33 Iron Lynx entry of Jason Lowe, so I'm not really sure what's transpired there, unless he's had a spin or come off the circuit. There's Jason Lowe. This is the position he was in on track. No, that's the Harmony Racing entry with the SQDA Grit Motorsport entry immediately behind. So that is the battle back for position number 7, and it looks like Liang Jiatong has taken the position away from Brian Lee, or John Quan rather. That won't go down particularly well with the local fans. Let's see what John Quan can do as a result of that. But they will certainly be looking for a return to the podium. As things stand at the moment, they're 3rd in the AM category, the lead of the AM category, and it would be their first win if they can manage to continue on. Jason Lowe doing a brilliant job off the back of that opening stanza by Mark Darwin. from Sombat and Lamahadtai. The star performance by Absolute Racing entry, a second currently in AM, is up front. That lead, well, we'll see shortly because we've just gone down to lap number 21. What does Giltrap have over Dan Wells? There's a fair bit of fresh air between the two cars. And Dan Wells has just crossed the line now. The lead is now out to 18 seconds. So I would hazard a guess that we're talking about overtaking opportunities. And there's certainly plenty of action on track at the moment. But it appears very much as Jason Lowe comes under fire now from Liang Jiatong, who's going to have a look down the inside. How's this going to wind up? That was tight. He just managed to pull out because that overtaking move with a big wide exit and a fast-flowing corner afterwards may have been on, but certainly it wasn't there. Ahead of them now is the battle for the LC Class Honours. These AM entries are going to be right on their tail very, very soon. Liang Jiatong back behind the wheel again. He's had another look down the inside of Jason Lowe. Is he going to get it done? Yes, he has got it done. What can John Quan do? He's just had to get out of the throttle. Just rode up over the curb. And certainly the curbs are quite high, the sausage curbs here at Inje Speedium. You want to avoid them as much as you can. There's certainly suspension compliance in these cars, but not the same as your road cars. Now John Quan looks up the inside. Does he pull it off? Jason Lowe tries to protect. He does a double banger. 2 for 1 if you don't mind. Thanks very much. He takes Super Chai in that move as well. So now that has opened the door for Harry O to extend his advantage. He was under fire from the points leader in Lamborghini Cup, and now he's got 3 cars, or 2 cars now between them. We'll see how this one plays out. John Quan keen to get that position back. He won't like this at all. So that has moved them up the order. Giltrap and Vanderdrift comfortably out in front of the field. 141.5 last time round, 142 dead for Dan Wells, but that would have been as a result of traffic. I'm sure you'll see that Wells' time next time round will be well and truly within reach of the young New Zealander, and I would expect it to be quicker if he's going to want to close down that gap. But instead of being 10 seconds behind, he's now 18 seconds adrift of the number 84 Absolute Racing entry. Third position, Li Chung continues to hold on, but still under fire from Wei in the Safe House entry. And they are comfortably clear now of Aniwat, Lamahadtai, who must have had a drama somewhere after we watched them on track. So disappointing for the number 19 Thai entry. They are, however, still holding on to the AM class lead, so it's not all bad news. As there is the battle. Is that the battle, in fact, for the LC Cup honours? If it is, that would tend to suggest that Super Chai has now taken that position back from Harry O, or is it another car I'm looking at on screen? There's 4 or 5 predominantly black, carbon black, of course, Evo 2s circulating. We love Super Chai's Siam Gas course entry. You see it on screen. You can see it a country mile away. Bright orange, of course. Some of the other liveries, a little bit harder to pick. Certainly a lot easier than open wheelers. But it'd be interesting to see just who Super Chai was battling. Of course, they are further back down the order. They're a lap back from the leaders. But outright, your leaders and pro class leaders and championship points leaders are Chris Vanderdrift and Marco Giltrap, who is at the wheel of that car. The young Kiwi honing his skills off to the Thailand Super Series next weekend to Sepang International Circuit to get some more miles. And he will continue to improve before appearing back here with Lamborghini Super Trofeo Asia in 3 weeks' time at Shanghai International Circuit for round 5 of the championship. Make sure you join us for that one. Be nice to be back at Shanghai after a fairly long sabbatical, thanks COVID. There's the 2 orange cars on screen. Super Chai, Jason Lowe. He's trying to work out what the dark coloured car is behind. Certainly there's been no change in the order for Lamborghini Cup. Pro-Am leader, or Pro-Am 1, 2, 3, is it Dan Wells from Li Chung and Wei and Nassi. They are positions 2, 3, and 4. The AM class leader is Aniwat, Mai in the number 19 entry. Second in pro class and sixth outright. Liang Jiatong. John Quan is second in AM for SQDA Grit Motorsport and eighth outright. Further back than they would like. Ninth and fourth in the AM category is Eric Kay for Triple Ace Racing. And then Gavin Huang is in position number 5 for the AM category and rounding out the top 10 in the racecraft entry for Lamborghini Soul. 8 minutes left in this very, very enjoyable race. It's going to be a pity to drive away from Inje Speedium tomorrow. Fantastic venue. One of the most picturesque I've ever visited. Very similar in many ways in the way it's nestled in amongst the forest and the trees to Nürburgring and Spa. Certainly a number of the famous European circuits. But at 3.908 kilometres and 21 turns, I'm going to call 5A and 5B 2 turns, sorry. So it's 21 turns. It is a very, very busy circuit. Now that is Li Chung and Wei battling over position number 3, the final place on the outright podium. Car on screen's not really too bothered about the outright podium. He lead now 17.8 seconds. So as predicted, Dan Wells is punching out quicker laps, but last time round, half a second shy of Giltrap. By contrast, I think the heat's starting to get to some of the drivers behind them. Li Chung a 47.8. Wei a 47.5. Aniwat's recovering and may be able to make up some ground. He pulled in 4 seconds on the drivers ahead of him last time round, although he's 9 seconds back. So he really has had a setback somewhere along the line, the Thai driver. The Harmony Racing entry, 4 seconds further back, 42.9 for Liang Jiatong. So he's not too far off the pace of the 2 leading cars. 42.5 also for John Quan, so he's right on the money. Those 2 cars have got a little bit of work to do, about 4.5 seconds on the cars in front of them. So things aren't over completely yet. Just over 6 minutes left in this race. Eric Kay and Jason Lowe a little bit further back. Jason Lowe's very impressive time, 42.5. Sorry, I apologise. He did a 47.0, 44.3 for Eric Kay and a 45.8 for young Gavin Huang. Johnson Huang, by contrast, his father, 48.2. It's a bit of a bragging rights on the dinner table this evening for the younger of the 2 Huang drivers. Super Try, 47.4. He has taken back the lead of the Lamborghini Cup. Unfortunately for Harry O, he had him there for a while. They lost 4 seconds during the compulsory pit stop, although that's not entirely true because Super Chai, being a single driver entry, had to stop for 3 seconds longer. In fact, he'd lost 4 seconds, so he's gained that back again. Third in Lamborghini Cup is Kumar Prabhakaran, and behind him, quite a lengthy gap back to Dr. Ma. Oh, that looks like there might be a bit of a position change coming on here. John Quan is very keen to get past Liang Jiatong. Can he do it? He knows this circuit. The second of the 5s into turn 6. So he got through in 5B. The Harmony Racing entry closes the door through into 7. Down to turn 8. He's got the inside again. I don't think John Quan, despite his mastery of this circuit, is going to be able to pull that one off. Has another look. He's certainly got plenty of pace. He's wide awake now. As we get towards the closing stages of this race, with just on 4.5 minutes to go, John Quan is looking for a position change. He doesn't want to be 7th. They started this race in position number 7. He wants to be further forward of this Harmony Racing entry. Those 2 entries have been very closely linked, not just for this race, but also during race 1 this morning. So some great action between those 2 teams. Of course, the number 16 entry, a pro class entry, the number 63 entry, an AM class entry. Just goes to show you the performance of the local drivers in the Grit Motorsport entry around their home track. Experience does play something or pay something. Talking to John on yesterday as we were doing a little bit of a track walk. He said, really, track experience doesn't mean much anymore, does it? The home track advantage is a thing of the past. He's really having to work their magic over the course of this weekend. Did make the outright podium, took the AM class victory in opening race this morning, but it's been a lot more difficult for the two South Korean drivers during this second race, and they have been amongst the star performers of the 2023 season. Marco Giltrap continuing to lead at the front of the field. A second taken out of him last lap round by Dan Wells. He's still comfortably at the front of this field. The advantage now 16.8 seconds. And with a couple of laps left in this second race, race 8 of 12 for the 2023 season, I think he's pretty much got this one covered. I think the championship points too for the pro category certainly will work to the advantage of Giltrap and Vanderdrift. 106 coming in. They will extend that advantage by virtue of another victory to 121. Shengwei Zhu is not competing this weekend. Jiangtong Lang Yang is racing this weekend. He is currently second in class, but he has only 30 points to his name. And with the advantage that Giltrap and Vanderdrift will have, there'll be more than 70 points advantage to them as we head into the last two rounds of the championship. And maximum points on offer, by my calculation, would be 64. So unofficially, I'm not crowning it because that's not my job. But I think for New Zealand fans, they can pretty much celebrate a pro-class victory and back-to-back victory for Chris Vanderdrift, certainly, as the reigning pro champion for Lamborghini Super Trofeo Asia, having won that in 2019. We've got some action back on track now. That is Chung Lee. Oh, and this will be interesting too, because it's the last two cars in this field that the ones that are battling. So that's the number 19 entry for Anuwat. And he is battling for championship honours. Brian Lee, who is the fourth of the cars in that train. And in between, Liang Jiatong, who is in the white Harmony Racing entry. Now, has there been a position change there? Was that? Yeah, I'd say Li Chung may have been advised by the TRT racing team just to get out of that one. They want to put themselves in harm's way, and there's nothing to be gained really in track position in their championship battle. So a wise counsel from the team to just leave that one open. But this is for track position. This is positions number, now 4, 5 and 6, with Li Chung having dropped back to position number 7. Will we see a position change with less than 30 seconds to go in this second race? Stay with us for the podium presentations. They're always a hoot. These drivers really do love a presentation. The Lamborghini Cup drivers especially. They really do like the champagne. Not much of it's consumed. Most of it's worn. A little bit more battle further back. That looks like it may be Jason Lowe, number 33. Iron Links entry, and he's battling with, Eric Kay's really found some pace. I was trying to see which dark coloured car that was. Is that Marco Giltrap crossing the line? Checkered flag time. I'm suggesting that's Marco Giltrap, and there you have it. Another victory for the mighty duo, the dynamic duo of Marco Giltrap and Chris Vanderdrift. That really has been an impressive effort from the number 84. Absolute Racing entry for the Giltrap Group and Lamborghini Auckland. That will be win number 6 of 8. Back-to-back wins here at Inje Speedium, Back-to-back wins also at Fuji Speedway. The last 4 races, they have been undefeated as an outright team. And by my calculations, provisionally, they will be your 2023 Pro Class champions for the 2023 Lamborghini Super Trofeo Asia season. Second across the line, he got to within 10 seconds, but I'd say Marco Giltrap really did wind the wick down over the closing laps. to Dan Wells and Oscar Lee back on the top step of the podium. I think that's their 6th victory in Pro-Am this year. Their only blemish coming during the opening race this morning with a clutch failure sidelining the car. Dan Wells unable to make the compulsory pit stop window. Oscar Lee unable to turn laps. But this time round, he's handed his teammate a great opportunity. Second outright, first in Pro-Am. Miko Nassi and Wei Liang Ni for Safe House Racing cross the line in position 3, second in Pro-Am. Aniwat hangs on to position number 4 and takes the victory in the number 19 Star Performance by Absolute Racing entry he shares with Prom Sombat for the AM category. Is that a car off on the outside of turn 1 there? Yeah, it is. It seems to be moving. Hopefully there's no real drama there, apart from the fact he's just stopped for a breather. I think everybody has been classified across the line. Position number 5, Liang Zhaitong and David Chen for Harmony Racing. And second in the pro category, 6th across the line, John Kwan and Brian Lee. They did get 6th in the end, would have liked 5th. The SQDA Grit Motorsport entry will take 2nd in the overall honours for the AM category. 3rd for AM will be Jason Lowe and Mark Darwin, unable to retain that lead that they had earlier in the race. Position number 7 and 3rd in Pro-Am for Lee Chung and Jonathan Chicotto. 9th outright, 4th in the AM category, Eric Kay and Henry Kay for Triple Ace Racing. And rounding out the 10 is Gavin Huang and David Rio for the Racegraph team. They finish ahead of their BC Racing teammates, Johnson Huang and Vincent Tsai. Super Chai takes top honours again in Lamborghini Cup and extends his points lead over Kumar after taking the top points for the first time. Well, he was on top earlier in the year, but Kumar certainly has dropped back to position number 2. Harry, Owen, Aziko, who were so close to their maiden victory in Lamborghini Cup, crossed the line 13th outright and 2nd in Lamborghini Cup. Kumar is 3rd, and Dr. Ma has completed a marathon effort on his own. The veteran driver out of Hong Kong drives with Keith Wong from Australia, the Macanese driver, not completing the rest of the championship. Dr. Ma doing the job in this impressive heat on his own. You'll need a nice sit down and a cup of tea after this one. Crosses the line in position number 15. So all 15 starters make it to the checkered flag. That's just the way we like to see it. And there were some predictions we might see some safety car interventions on this very demanding 21-turn layout at Inje Speedium, but that was not the case. We didn't see the safety car on track during either race. So full marks to the drivers. The race director lined them up early in the weekend and said, well, there's nothing much to prove here this weekend. Yes, you're battling for championship honours, but take it easy. Work yourselves in. There's no records to be broken in a 90-minute practice session. Go out and learn the circuit. Of course, a number of drivers have done laps on the simulator, but there's never any substitute for a backside in a seat. And the undulations and the elevation changes certainly do provide a different sensation to a simulator. Pure laps on circuit are what you need, and that's what certainly handed Dan Wells the pole position in the opening race by virtue of his past experience here in open wheelers. And unfortunately for him and teammate Oscar Lee, whilst they've continued to press on with further victories in the Pro-Am category, as they have done in this race 2 today, they unfortunately had a blemish in the overall run during the championship this morning, but continue to lead. In fact, coming into this race, the Pro-Am championship points were Oscar Lee and Dan Wells on 90, Wei and Nassi on 77. So Lee and Wells have added another 15 points, so they'll be at 105. Wei and Nassi will be second in category, so they'll be up to 89, 105 to 89, so a 16-point advantage. Tony Walls and Jackson Walls absent this weekend. Lee Chung, Jonathan Chicotto will take 3rd, so they'll add 10 points to their 39 points they started this race with, so they'll be up to 49. But certainly the battle for Pro-Am as we go into Shanghai in 3 weeks' time will be between the Oscar Lee, Dan Wells entry, and the Wei Liang Ni and Miko Nasi entry. And we'll see where that will wind up. That may well go through to the final round of the championship in Vallelunga in mid-November. The AM class battle, well, they didn't manage to take another victory, but for Brian Lee and John Kwan, they were on top of the championship points coming into this race on 84 points. Aniwat and Prom Sombat were on 77. Now, they finished in reverse order, so it's 15 to the Thai team, taking them on my math, to 92. 12 points to the South Korean drivers will take them to 106. So that battle continues to wage on. Jason Lowe and Mark Darwin, they will add another 10 points to their championship tally, so they're not completely out of reach. And Henry Kay and Eric Kay, another solid run for them. They dropped back to 4th after their result last time out in the opening race this morning. Great to see Bobby Buncher back, but certainly for Johnson Huang and Vincent Tai, they will move forward a little bit with additional points. In Lamborghini Cup, Super Chai, who took over the points lead after his result this morning and Kumar's retirement, will extend that advantage with what amounts to his 4th win of the season. Kumar with just 3. Dr. Ma will retain position number 3 on outright points. He was 70 coming into this round, 12 points back from the category lead. And the O brothers will add a solid haul of 12 points again. So still the only team in Lamborghini Cup without a class victory. So they got a little bit of work to do as we get towards the closing stages this season. But Lamborghini Cup 2 looks like it's going to go all the way down to the wire. So recapping, Marco Giltrep and Chris Vanderdrift take the victory from Dan Wells and Oscar Lee. Wei and Nasi in position number 3 for Safe House. Then it is Aniwat and Prom Sombat, the number 19 star performance by Absolute Racing Thai entry in position number 4. Liang and David Chen for Harmony Racing in position number 5. John Kwan and Brian Lee, the local stars in the SQDA Grit Motorsport entry, finish in position number 6. From Lee Chung and Jonathan Chicotto, Jason Lowe and Mark Darwin in position number 8. Position number 9 for the K brothers, Eric and Henry for Triple Ace Racing. Position number 10, Gavin Huang and David Rio. Position number 11 for Johnson Huang and Vincent Tai. Position number 12 for Super Chai. 13 for Harry and Azik O. 14 for Kumar Prabhakaran. And 15 rounding out the field for Dr. Ma. Another great race to close out what has been a brilliant few days here at this beautiful Inje Speedium circuit. A beautiful part of the world. Some great support from Lamborghini Sol. The SQDA Grit Motorsport team have a lot of people here as well. And you can catch up with the action on the various Squadra Corsa social media platforms. Of course, Squadra Corsa, the performance arm of Lamborghini. You can look back over the various races during the course of this year on YouTube through their channel. And the various social media platforms will highlight photographs and video content from the course of this fantastic event. So that's 4 rounds in the books. Off to Shanghai International Circuit in 3 weeks' time for races number 9 and 10 of the season, and closing out the program with the final 2 Super Trofeo Asia races at Vallelunga in Italy on the 16th and 17th of November, followed by the World Final, where the leading teams from North America, Europe and Asia come together over the 18th and 19th of November. And that'll certainly be one to keep a very, very close eye on. Predominantly these days, the World Finals are held in Italy. In the past, they had competed in various parts of the world, including Sepang International Circuit in Malaysia. And we would love to see them back for a world final. Hint, hint. Not sure that will happen, because certainly the bulk of the competitors are overseas in Europe, and transportation over there is an awful lot easier than it is here. The Top Speed operation that manage this championship Everything from trophies to catering to transport to sponsorship and all the facets in between. They will be very busy this afternoon as they load race cars into containers, seal them up and stick them into transport across to Shanghai International Circuit. We will go across to the podium very, very shortly. We'll start with the outright result. And what a great result it was for the dynamic duo, Batman and Robin. Well, Batman was older, wasn't he? Let's be fair. So we could call Chris Vanderdrift Batman. I don't know whether Marco Giltrap will be impressed with the whole analogy about being Robin, but he's the younger guy and he's going to certainly take over as he continues to improve his career. They will stand on the top step of the podium. Alongside them, after a tough opening race early this morning where they weren't able to get to halfway through with a clutch failure, good recovery from the DW Evans GT duo of Oscar Lee and Dan Wells. And third this time round, Miko Nasi, Weiliang Ni. For Safehouse, had a team change after the opening round, and it has gone swimmingly for them, I'd have to say. They've been very, very competitive. Nasi was very impressive during the course of this weekend. So great to see them back on the podium. Well-deserved result. As the Hankook Fastest Lap Award was begun last time round. I'm not sure who will be presented that this time round. I'm not seeing fastest lap. I see the last lap time, which is not really reflective of the fastest lap. But the pole sitter is just off left of screen and likely to join these guys on the podium. That, of course, is Jonathan Chicotto with his third pole position. I'm struggling. It's warm here for the commentator too. His third pole position of the 2023 season for the young Venezuelan driver to go with his dual podiums in Australia. He has been a real find in this championship too, because a lot of experience over there in Europe. Great to have him with us. Good mix of pro and am drivers, and the pro drivers certainly sharing their knowledge with the amateur drivers and making this experience an awful lot better. Andre Couto, former Macau Grand Prix winner, driver coach for all these drivers, often goes out, sets a benchmark lap in one of the cars, and that provides the data for the various teams to take a look at. We'll be off to Champagne time before long. Grab your raincoat. This should be interesting. Of course, we'll see a couple of these drivers again because you had a mix of pro-am on the podium. So you'll see Oscar Lee and Dan Wells back. Nasi and Wei will also be back. And I do suggest that Jonathan Chicotto is going to get another chance to grab a bottle of champagne and make a bit of a mess of it. So we will see them shortly with the Pro-Am podium, of course. Wells and Lee take the top spot. Nasi and Wei will take position number 2, and third for Pro-Am for Lee Chung and Jonathan Chicotto. They will be up very, very shortly. There's a lot of excitement going on out there for the Pro-Am category. That win by Oscar Lee and Dan Wells is their 6th win of the year. So 6 wins out of 8 starts, 1 solitary DNF. That came this morning. And a 3rd placed finish in the opening race at Fuji after a little bit of contact and a bit of a setback in the chicane, a couple of corners from home mid-race for Oscar Lee. That shoved him back down the order, allowed a lot of cars to run through on him after a restart. Certainly a lesson learned for the young Hong Kong-based driver. There is Chicotto and Lee Chung back on the podium. They're on the podium again this morning. Nassi and Way left of screen. Great to see these guys in action. And for Dan Wells and Oscar Lee, Dan Wells now a team owner alongside Josh Evans. Plenty of experience there between those two. Had a lot to do with each other with various race guises over the years. Certainly an open wheel competition. Get our official photographs for Lamborghini Squadra Corsa out of the way. And then it will be time for the champagne shower. It's going to be hot and sticky for these guys. I can only gauge off track temperature, which is the only indication I've got. I don't have an ambient temperature guide, but track temperature at the moment just under 53 degrees. So as you can imagine, it's bright sunlight outside. It is hot. And now for some of those drivers, it'll not only be hot, it'll be hot and sticky. We move on to the AM class podium, and that battle really has come alive. Brian Lee and John Quan, the local heroes, they have been real sensations this year. This morning was their 4th win from 7 races. They've been on the podium in every race but the second race at Sepang in Malaysia. Had some dramas. That sidelined them. Forced a DNF. Outside of that, they've been almost flawless. Anuat from Sombat, they've had just a solitary win. That came in race 2 at the Ben Motorsport Park in Australia. After claiming pole position point on that weekend. And for the number 19 Thai entry, this will be their 2nd victory and a very welcome result for the Absolute Racing supported team. There they are left of screen. Fantastic result. Typical of the Thais, they're always smiling. Very serious about their motorsport. And a great result for them. Well received by this big vocal South Korean crowd. 2nd in the AM category to the local stars, John Quan and Brian Lee, of course. They get the loudest cheer. And Jason Lowe, far right of screen, next to Mark Darwin in position 3. Well, they're far left of screen. Now they're going to be far right of screen. Sorry, I'm looking at it from a slightly different perspective, sitting just here off the podium. Much love for the SQDA Grit Motorsport team. 2nd this time, not 1st. But they keep their consistency going. And to add to their 4 wins, this will be a second place finish and a 3rd. So a good haul of trophies for the local team as we head towards Shanghai International Circuit and what will be their debut visit to that venue. So they've got a lot of work cut out for them, but certainly the opening stanza of this lap is very similar, although on a much larger scale, at Shanghai International Circuit with a fast, long sweeping right into a long sweeping left and then a hairpin not too far afterwards. And they've got some seriously long straights there. Not too much straight here at Inje Speedium, but certainly they'll make up for that when we get to Shanghai in 3 weeks' time. John Flynn, the man responsible for Squadra Corsa, right of screen. Done such a brilliant job in bringing Super Trofeo Asia back to life after a 3-year sabbatical thanks to COVID. And he will be looking forward to a return to Shanghai. If memory serves me correctly, that's now his home base. And we go over to the hotly contested Lamborghini Cup classification. Super Chai takes another victory. That is full domination for the Thai driver. 2 wins here at Inje. He hasn't managed that so far this year. He took a win in race 1 at Sepang. He took a win in race 3 at the Bend in Australia. Didn't make the top step of the podium after a tough weekend at Fuji. Was on target to grab a win, but had a spin coming through the fast sweeping opening turn. Just got the power delivery a little bit wrong, stepped the back of the car out, and in the process allowed the number 37 entry from Iron Links of Kumar Prabhakaran to take that position away. And also, of course, Keith Vong, who made up a position and took the win in the second race at Fuji. There is Prabhakaran, was the leader of the LC category coming into this round. He is right of screen. Takes position 3 for this one. Zico and Harry O left of screen. They love a celebration. And good to see for them. Unfortunately, despite being on target for a first-time win, they're the only team in Lamborghini Cup not to have taken an outright win this year. Still got a couple more opportunities. One at Vallelunga, one at Shanghai in 3 weeks' time, or 2 opportunities rather at Vallelunga, 2 at Shanghai. That will keep them right in this title race. So thank you for joining us. We're going to sign off now from Inje Speedium in South Korea for what has been round 4 of the 2023 Lamborghini Super Trofeo Asia season. We will see you from Shanghai in China in 3 weeks' time.